I'm Julie Bartkey with this Senate update. The finance bill that uses more general fund dollars than any other area will be debated by the full Senate on Wednesday. The omnibus education finance bill totals $17 billion with an increase of $365 million from the last biennium. Provisions include partial funding for universal pre-kindergarten and a 1% increase each year to the base per pupil funding formula. We caught up with the chair of the Senate Education Committee, Charles Wiger, for his perspective on his bill, and also with lead Republican Sean Nienow, who has his own idea of how the money should be spent. So what would you consider, out of all of these provisions, the crown jewel, so to speak?
Well, it's always important to have additional money in the formula to give districts the ability to continue on to factor inflation. We still need to catch up, actually. So first and foremost is providing additional funds in formula. But I want to also strongly emphasize the infusion of money that we've put in for early learning opportunities, and particularly for school readiness. And we have a program which would make programs available for 4-year-olds in high-quality early learning programs through our schools. Schools could go elsewhere to contract that, but we have $70 million to roll that out, and we're really excited about that.
Senator, you mentioned the formula. This bill does take a very targeted approach with a majority of its funds. Some school officials, a lot of superintendents, have been asking for more money on the formula, say 3 or 4%. Why go the direction that you went?
Well, we are providing the 1-in-1 on the formula, and that's much better than what the House is providing. It's our hope that we will be able to provide more. The target of the $361.5 million was less than what we had hoped for. We're going to continue working for that. The governor has been at $700 million and actually is urging to increase on the formula. So it's still early in the process. As we get ready for conference committee, I expect that number that would be available for formula to increase. That's our hope. It's our intent. And in terms of the 1-in-1, we could have gone a little bit higher, but we also wanted to reflect high priorities. And Ready for K, the early learningness provision is a key part of it. Another one I want to make sure that is underscored is for school building repairs and facilities. There's so many districts that need additional money. We read about a lot of the big projects that are going on, but what about the schools where buildings, which often will average 40 to 50 years old and sometimes nearly 90, where they need repairs, and the general fund has to help subsidize that. Moreover, there's a difference, there's an inequity now in Minnesota where if you aren't a part of an alternative facilities program, the largest 25 school districts get this, but if you aren't a part of that program, then you spend $300 less per student on school facilities. That's not fair. We're going to correct it, and we have nearly $50 million to do that, and that will help all districts in the end.
Senator, as you mentioned, early learning,
yes.
pre-K. The governor is asking to fully fund pre-K at Can we do that question over again? At least we have some video.
If you do one for me too.
Approximately.
Yeah, I did one of those.
Okay, ready?
Okay.
So, Senator, as you mentioned, pre-K, the governor is proposing fully funding pre-K at approximately $343 million for the biennium. At one point, the Senate was also anticipating fully funding pre-K. Is this something that you think, will your dollar amount rise as well? Do you predict that?
I commend the governor for the vision on universal pre-K 4, and he would fully fund it. And Senator Hoffman had a bill, I believe it was Senate File 6, that would have reflected that. It provided vision and inspiration, a direction to go, but you need to have the resources to do that. We're still very convinced that Ready for K is the objective. In fact, it's a matter of state policy. So we have modified that program by coming up with the use of school readiness dollars. It would be an optional program. It wouldn't be mandated. It would be funded for 4-year-olds in a district that wanted to provide it, and they would have the program for approximately 500 hours a year. It would be free for at least a few hours a day, depending on what the district worked out. So it's not the full program that the governor had, but it makes steps toward getting to that direction. So that's why we put not only $70 million into the Ready for K for 4-year-olds, but we provide additional money for scholarships, $5 million, and some other targeted programs as well. It's a substantial increase in funds, but it's important because you are much more likely to graduate, to be college and career ready if you are fully prepared for kindergarten. Best return we can get on our investment.
Senator, you mentioned earlier some of the differences between your bill and the House. You've been through this a time or two. How do you reconcile some of these differences, particularly the early childhood? At this point, the House doesn't have any money appropriated for universal pre-K. It's 0.6% increase on the base formula. How do you move through this process, and can we expect a finance package for education?
Well, we'll get a package put together. The House has a different allocation, a different priority as to what they're doing, but in the end, we all represent Minnesotans, and we'll come together. It'll be some modification of the proposal that we have. The governor will certainly weigh in, but when it's all over, I expect you're going to see additional early education opportunities. They will have some other high priorities that we'll fully discuss as well. But ultimately, in the process, it comes together, and I remain optimistic that we'll do that. A number of the proposals that we have in our E-12 policy bill and in our E-12 finance bill has bipartisan support, and in the end we will reach that agreement.
Have you had any conversations with House Chair Jennifer Loon?
I've had a couple of conversations. Haven't had a sit down to go through a lot of the policies yet, but it's been very amicable thus far.
It's one of those bills where you look at it and go, how can you spend so much money and do so little for our existing classrooms and teachers and the needs of our schools as they state them? We spend all kinds of money. We do all kinds of new things. We mandate that it be for this, that, and the other thing, but we do almost nothing. 1%, a 1% increase in the basic funding increase for the existing classrooms. The one thing that the schools are saying, help us out with this. At least it's right at the top of their list, and we're doing almost nothing, and it's really, really, really unfortunate that the Senate can spend that much money and do that little for our existing needs.
And earlier this session, you helped roll out the Your School, Your Needs series of education reform initiatives. Did any of those get included in this overall package? And if so, or if not, why not?
Well, why not? I could go into a lot of different reasons why I think that is, but the reality is that bill got referred to the Finance Committee. The Finance Chair, Senator Cohen, did not see fit to refer that down to the Budget Division, so it was never given a hearing. My interpretation of that is they didn't want to deal with a public hearing, because I think it's embarrassing for the leadership in the Senate to have that proposal and to have people at the table saying, here's why this makes sense. The Your Schools, Your Needs provision basically said, all right, you're going to spend this much money. We're not going to fight about how much money to spend. We're not going to say it should be more. We're not going to say it should be less. We're going to tell you how you can spend that money and do it smarter and do it better and do better by your schools. What we said is take this money, put it into, not in the formula because that builds some inequities. It is highly tilted towards Minneapolis, St. Paul, some other areas. They get a higher percentage of that money than others when you put it in the formula. So we put it into a new category called basic needs. A dollar is a dollar, a student is a student, every student got the same dollar. So we did complete equity with the new money, not the old money, we left that alone, but the new money, we started to create equity. And then we said to the schools, spend it how you see fit. You want to do all day K, you want to do pre-K, you want to do free breakfast, you want to raise salaries to get better teachers, whatever your school needs, spend it that way. We're not going to mandate it. And then we went one more step and said, if the legislature passes new mandates this session for the next 2 years, You can decide if it's too expensive or too cumbersome or doesn't make sense, and you can opt out and do a trial period of 2 years where schools can say those new mandates, they don't work for us. And that would open up the discussion about future mandates. And the legislature would have to decide, are we going to continue on with those mandates, or are we going to continue with the relief? And the whole goal of that proposal was trust the schools and make incremental change. Get better equity and get more local control, and start a discussion about how much should the state mandate to the local schools. And that, I think, is why the powers that be didn't want to have that discussion publicly.
Senator, it sounds a bit as if you are practicing for introducing this as an amendment on the floor when it's heard. What is your anticipation? Are you going to leave this alone, or are you going to raise the issue?
Oh, no. In the K-12 committee, I did offer a scaled-down version in committee, and we'll do at least that when the bill comes up on the floor. We'll certainly have that discussion again.
What do you think of the all-day but the fully funded pre-K option? The Senate does not fully fund it. The governor does. The House doesn't at all. Is it something you do support?
Well, when the question comes up, all-day, universal pre-K, whatever you want to call it, is it a bad idea? Well, no, it's not going to hurt anybody. But the question is, if you're going to spend $500 million to do this, is that the best way to spend that money? And the answer, almost universally, when I talk to the activists, is probably not. Probably a better approach is to take a look, identify the high-risk demographics. Find those areas where there's likely to be problems, those individuals, those children, those families, whether it be geographic or socioeconomic or whatever the demographic might be, and target the resources there, because that's where you're going to get the bang for the buck. There's no question about that. You just open up the doors and say, come one, come all. You're spending a ton of money on a lot of people where you're not going to really make a huge difference. I mean, even Head Start has done its own study. And Head Start's a quality program. Everyone says, yep, they do a great job. By the time those kids get into 5th grade, you can't tell the difference because they're not targeting the resources specifically to those high-need demographics.
Senator, finally, we've talked a lot about what maybe you think is lacking in this bill. What do you like in it?
I mean, there are some good things. I mean, we do put a little bit of money on the base. We're trying to help out some schools. We do have some testing reform, I believe, that's in the bill, one of the two bills. So there are some good things. The major challenge in the finance bill, because the finance bill is mostly about money, is where we're spending all the money, and it's spent in ways that are mandated. And that doesn't help the schools and the existing classroom and the existing students and the existing families, and that's the biggest challenge.